So again, if you didn't know, not like I haven't mentioned it in the last 3 videos, because I want everyone to know, I was just at the Toronto International Film Festival, which despite being in Canada, is very cool. Kind of ends up being a greatest hits of the movies that came out of Venice and Cannes, then has some of its own exclusive goodies. I just need them to invite me back next year, so you're buckling in and we're talking about movies. 2019 TIFF remains not only to be the best film festival I've ever attended, but also just potentially one of the best times of my life. Like, Sundance is always super fun to travel to, but 2019 TIFF had Portrait of a Lady on Fire. It had Parasite, Jojo Rabbit, Knives Out, The Lighthouse, Marriage Story, First Love, Joker premiered there, Honey Boy, Bad Education, just so many good movies. 2019 was a stacked year in general, but damn! So I was looking forward to the 2021 TIFF, returning to the 6. And while it could never stack up to 2019, I still had a lot of fun. Saw a bunch of great movies and only missed out on one I really wanted to catch due to a tragic scheduling error. And I'm a little tilted because it's actually one that's getting awards buzz, and honestly, I'm a bit upset that Jamie Dornan didn't personally hand deliver me a ticket to my own private screening of Belfast because of all the amazing coverage I've done of 50 Shades of Grey. Honestly though, I am really hoping to catch that soon because I don't think it's going to end up playing where I live, so that's a bummer. So I thought I'd go through some of like what was the most hyped going into the festival, whether I liked it or not, and then some other stuff that I ended up enjoying. I actually saw less than I usually do because I tried to have some like actual interactions with people, but I still saw a ton of movies. Why am I saying saw like Tweety Bird? Okay, just keep moving. But yeah, a lot of movies, some of which I meshed with, some of which not so much. So starting off with what had to be the worst of what I saw in some ways, but then probably also the most entertaining watch of the whole festival, which I will be covering in full probably in my next video, Dear Evan Hansen. Based on the musical of the same name, Dear Evan Hansen asks the question, can we take a 27-year-old man who recently played a believable teenager but make him look 35 and still stick him in a high school setting? And the answer is yes, they can, and they did. In all honesty, Dear Evan Hansen is something that leaves me feeling pretty conflicted. At its heart, it has a strong message. It says it's trying to speak to the outsider and all of us, and I think the music is really good, which obviously matters in a musical. But the way that message is packaged and delivered is horrifying. Following the suicide of a classmate, the family wrongfully get the idea that Evan may have been their son's closest friend. And instead of correcting them or downplaying that connection, he just dives 2 feet full in, singing some song that sounds more like they were having a secret like relationship than secret friendship, which there wouldn't have been anything wrong with that if that is actually what had happened, but that's not what happened. They weren't friends, and he's obsessed with the sister. This is a story that if it was told from a different perspective, it would be a horror thriller, using a grieving family as his chosen family and them seeing him as some kind of like surrogate son. Something that I might have felt a little bit more sympathetic to if Evan was like, I don't know, 14, but he is a high school senior. Like, I don't care how awkward you are. It is easier to clam up and then just keep denying than sing about how close your friendship was and make a bunch of fake emails. It's honestly quite sociopathic. I think fans of the musical will really enjoy it. I also had a blast watching it for mostly all the wrong reasons, and it still did emotionally hit with those like heavier moments. Like, I feel the emotions the characters are feeling. I genuinely feel for the family. There's a couple great messages packaged inside this, and I'd really like to see more of this movie from Connor's perspective. But I guess that's kind of one of the points they're making. You can't necessarily get answers after the fact, but it did seem like his family was genuinely trying, but I never got the impression that Evan had to make up for much of what he did. Either way, I think and hope this movie will be a really good starting point for some serious conversations with some nuance added to the events that take place in the story, I hope. And I'm down for anything that might make teenagers more comfortable with reaching out for help when they need it. Honestly though, this was also directed by Stephen Chbosky, who did Perks of Being a Wallflower, both wrote the book and ended up directing the movie. And I actually really like that story and that movie and think it does a better job of what this is probably trying to do. Also, Ben Platt, I'm sorry, but there absolutely had to be a better way to make you work as a high school senior appearance-wise beyond foundation and hunching. I get that you wanted to be the titular role because, I don't know, you wanted to just reprise your theatrical experience. I won't even hold it against you, but I will hold a lot against the makeup choices. Keep an eye out for my full breakdown, which should be my next video. I'm actually pretty excited to do that, even though it is juggling in some serious issues. Next up is a horror movie that absolutely did not hit for me, but some people are saying might be like the next cult classic, and I think it would be really fun as like a Halloween party movie or something like that. It's called Dashcam. I'd personally just recommend watching Spree if you're looking for something that kind of channels that same idea with like live stream footage. But if you've ever wanted to see a movie where you genuinely wish the final girl would just die, this might be the movie for you. It's by the same people who did last year's Host movie that was told through a Zoom call, and this one is pretty much entirely happening through live streams. I didn't like this anywhere near as much as I like that movie. You can watch my thoughts on both Spree and Host. I'll have them linked somewhere on screen or down below. But I think if I had caught this at Midnight Madness with like that particular audience, I probably would have had a better time with it. It's a super short movie though, so no real loss giving it a go. Moving into some smaller ones that I really enjoyed, we have Terrorizers, which was an interesting movie with intersecting stories that you're just kind of waiting to see how everything's gonna line up. It feels very at home in the digital age and the terrifying reality of someone becoming obsessed with a person that they don't actually know. In ways that Dashcam felt too real to me in an exhausting way, this felt too real to me in like a validating way. I think it swung a little bit too hard in a direction of someone like losing a little bit of a grip on reality because of video games and stuff. But it's really hard to explain to people how someone you've never met or spoken to can create some entire false reality and relationship with you in their mind. And it sucks, and I don't even have it as bad as some other people do, but I'm kind of always interested for the directions that movies are going to start taking when they can shed light on some of those like more modern internet realities. But the movie as a whole just feels really lived in. You get these moments of different people's lives and how they build together to play into one specific incident, so you feel the impact more, and I definitely recommend it. Drive My Car was another one that I really liked. It's based on a novel by Haruki Murakami. The movie is quite long, but it's so easy to forget the runtime as you're just being so thoroughly swept into the world created. It basically tells the story of a theater director's teacher who's being driven to and from work, and the secrets of the past are steadily being unveiled the longer the two travel together. Then I kind of forgot about The Encounter and Compartment Number 6, which I also enjoyed. And last in this area is going to be Petite Mama. Last year, my mind, heart, soul, and body were rocked by Celine Sciamma's Portrait of a Lady on Fire. And this year, my heart was tenderly warmed by her latest project, Petite Mama. A really beautiful look at how children process grief, fear, and abandonment, and particularly how they may perceive the grief their parents are dealing with. It's a short, tight film with great performances from the two young actresses. It's the first movie I started my festival with, and I found it to be so beautiful. Worst Person in the World. This is one I almost skipped because it was described as being part of a trilogy, but I think it's in the same way that like Edgar Wright has the Cornetto trilogy, so that they're like not actually dependent on each other. But this is what I would consider a very enjoyable post-adolescent coming-of-age story, which is one of my favorite genres of movie that I don't know if anybody else refers to it by that terminology, but it's like everybody thinks you have to have your shit in order by like age 23 at max, but in reality, 23 might be the worst year of your life. I didn't even begin getting my shit in order until age like 25, and I can assure you that no one else thought I was getting my shit in order. But yeah, this is about a woman who is struggling both in love and career, completely switches up her trajectory, and we just follow along over a 4-year period. It's super effective, very real, and I absolutely recommend it. I'm Your Man. This is another unique one that I definitely recommend. It's about a scientist who has to take part in an AI experiment to get funding for her research. For 3 weeks, she has to live with an AI robot designed to morph into what would be her ideal life partner. It's quite funny while still being a really good look at what it even means to be human, and kind of like the extreme end trajectory of what we're dealing with now with how algorithms have infiltrated pretty much every aspect of our lives. But let's get into some of the stuff that had a lot of hype swirling around it going into the festival. First up is The Guilty. I'm mentioning this one specifically because I know a lot of Gyllenhaal fans are out there, and it's fine. It's a remake of a 2018 movie that I really, really enjoyed. It was probably one of my favorite movies of 2018. So I'd personally just recommend you going and watching that one, but I know people just won't, and this is going to be on Netflix. So it's not a bad movie. It's entertaining. It's probably one of those ones that I'll put on like if I'm visiting my parents because I think they'll probably enjoy it. Tells the story of a cop currently doing a stint as a 911 operator who gets a call that doesn't only change the course of his night, but potentially the course of the rest of his life. This is probably going to do super well on streaming, so I just, putting it on your radar, but if you care enough, go track down the 2018 version. Titane. Holy shit, Titane. I would just go into this blind, but I guarantee if you look up the synopsis for the movie, it will give you no indication for what's happening or what will happen in this movie, but if you look it up after you watch this movie, it's like a very fun inside joke. I don't think I laughed harder than reading the description for that movie after having seen the movie. I caught this at the Midnight Madness showing, which was definitely the right environment. It goes from being uncomfortable to watch because it's gruesome to uncomfortable because it's awkward. I actually felt sick a little bit early on, and if it had kept the tone that it was going for, I probably would have spent the entire runtime feeling a little bit unwell. So it certainly leaves an impact. It's definitely not the most intense thing I've ever seen at a festival. I think Nightingale definitely had a bigger impact of like shock value, and then Possessor was just way more brutal. But this is certainly an experience and probably one of the most unique movies you will ever watch in your life. Also in the category of things I will never ever recommend my parents ever watch in their lives. It won the Palme d'Or at Cannes, which was last won by Parasite. I don't like it anywhere near as much as Parasite, but it definitely follows that like genre bending aspect that Parasite did. There is a movie that seemed like it was being set up in the beginning that I would absolutely watch if it was made, but it just starts in one direction and then completely veers in a way that you could just never anticipate. And in all the insanity, it's really a story about redemption built out of a truly horrible lie that someone's willing to believe. It's an incredibly well-made movie, and if you watch it, I doubt you'll be able to compare it to much else this year or maybe ever. Again, definitely not for everyone, but very unique. Another really popular one was The Humans because it was produced by A24. It is based off of a stage play, and it didn't quite as hard for me as it did some other people, including some of my friends, but I think I'd really love it if I did see it as an actual stage play. But I really just love the chemistry between these characters. It got a lot of good laughs at the showing that I was at. I feel like it just needed something else to really drive it home. It's basically all just contained into one New York apartment, but if you're in for a drama that still has good, delivered comedy, this might be for you. The Eyes of Tammy Faye. So this is the last movie of the festival that I caught sadly at home digitally, but I still had a lot of fun watching it. As fun as one can have with a movie about some really, really exploitative televangelists. The type of televangelist that said, you know what, God doesn't want you to be broke. Except God does want you to be broke so you can send me your money. The Jim Bakker way. So The Eyes of Tammy Faye is a biopic about Tammy Faye, former wife to Jim Bakker, aka that asshole that tried to sell people colloidal silver as a COVID cure in 2020. So former wife to literal piece of human shit. Either way, I actually learned a lot of things that I didn't know about Tammy Faye. I still think she was way more knowledgeable in her part of a massive exploitation project than she was kind of held accountable for, but she actually seemed to do a fair amount of good with her religion too. Seemed like someone who genuinely believed that all God's creations were beautiful because God doesn't make mistakes, and that means everyone, including gay people. I know there's like a bunch of articles on how she became this kind of like unlikely ally to the LGBTQ plus community because she even talked to people with AIDS, which was like unheard of in all sorts of places back when that epidemic was in full swing, but again, I wish they'd just gone deeper in certain areas of her involvement. Still an interesting watch though. Jessica Chastain was fantastic. Jim Bakker should be thanking the good Lord that someone was nice enough to cast Andrew Garfield to play him. The real spectacle here is genuinely like the costuming and makeup department that are very committed to achieving the look. But I'll just end up with an issue with anything that kind of like takes a subject like this and offers some kind of like redemption arc without doing that deeper look into like how much they were complicit, aware, and helping. Because everything that goes on in those televangelist networks causes lasting, permanent harm to people who watch them, and a lot of harm in like a larger scale of how they used to have genuine like political influence. And Jim Bakker, even after going to prison, has continued to manipulate that trust that people have in him in ways that are actually life-threatening. The movie isn't entirely kind to Jim Bakker by any means, but I think they could have definitely been a lot harsher, because at some points it just seems like he's someone who lost lost his way. He thought that just everybody should have the bounty of good fortune with literal fortune. But I just don't think you can keep that going when you know what you know about Jim Baker. And then just trying to play up that Tammy might have just been willfully naive and just more duped by her scummy husband. But when you're living a life that lavish and you know that there are money problems, you've kind of got to ask some questions. Otherwise, you're just like complicit. So you got to know what's going on. And I think the movie could have done more here, but still an enjoyable watch. Power of the Dog. Do you ever watch something that feels like a little bit awkward as it's going? Like you wish that maybe it was edited a little bit differently or some of the pacing had been switched up in areas, but then when it comes to its conclusion, it just doesn't leave your head? That's my experience with The Power of the Dog. I do still think this could be cleaned up a little bit in the beginning. I definitely want to see it again and maybe my opinion will change there, but this is a movie that seems like one thing until it becomes something completely different. And I'll probably make a full video going through it and how I noticed each element as it was being introduced through the story. I'm actually pretty excited to read the book that it's based on, and maybe that'll give me even like more fun things to talk about in that video. But this is one of those movies that I also had the most fun talking about after I saw it with friends, which is always a great sign. I think the music does a lot to set up aspects of this story. It's something that I actively took note of early on, and then it did pay off. So like, I just really like that. I love it when you can get little cues in more subtle ways like that. It's probably a career best performance for Cumberbatch. Plemons was great as always. Cody Smith-McPhee absolutely understood the assignment, and Kirsten Dunst brought exactly what was required to the role. And I'm just really excited to check it out again. This is going to be on Netflix soon, so enjoy. Spencer. This is a movie that completely hinges on its lead performance, and I am so happy to say that Kristen Stewart knocked it out of the park. I'm someone who's always been on Kristen's side. I really do love so many of the movies that she's in to various degrees, but that's why I think I'm a bit of an authority to talk about how hard she clearly worked to perfect this role. Some people may say that it was overly based on public appearances, but you know, that's what they have to work with, and I think she did great. Not that I consider myself to be like an expert. I'm not an expert on the royal family or Princess Diana. But covering the Christmas weekend that ultimately resulted in Princess Diana choosing to separate from Prince Charles, Spencer turns the real-life struggles she faced into a psychological nightmare for its viewers. Every moment watched and judged, every spark of individuality snuffed out. While it does take some creative liberties as it blends fact with fiction, like there's this whole side aspect of her getting obsessed with Anne Boleyn because of a book that was left in her room. But overall, it just feels like a genuine display of her resiliency. It's an entirely character-driven drama, essentially locking you in with Diana for the runtime of the movie, which is why Stewart's performance was so critical. It doesn't feel like a biopic in the way that people might be expecting, because again, it is really locked into that Christmas holiday rather than being a larger look at her life. But it's still a movie that carries such an emotional impact. Complete with a stunning score, beautiful shots, and a heart-wrenching look at what may have been her reality. A lot of people are going to think that you should just leave her story alone, or maybe you wish that this did take a bigger look at her life so you could highlight some more of those happier times. But at the end, I think this is a movie that's about a moment in her life where she was actually able to take some agency and control back, and I do think that's beautiful. Dune! I've got a whole video out about this that you can watch right now. It is spoiler-free until I talk about a few light spoilers at the end that I have clearly listed down below, but still largely spoiler-free even if you do watch the entire thing. And I really had a blast watching this. I'm definitely gonna watch it again once it's officially in theaters in North America. I think if you were at all excited, you should enjoy it. I know some people say that the characters are shallow compared to the book, but I guess I do kind of expect that when you're dealing with like that much source material for that much movie. But I'm still very excited for part 2. Only thing I'll clarify from that review is that the reason why that movie doesn't feel like it's necessarily doing anything particularly new is because Dune has clearly been the foundation for decades of sci-fi and even fantasy content. But as I clarified in the video, it does feel like that kind of like more standard story setup is making way to a larger subversion down the line, which is why I'm so excited for part 2. But last but not least, Last Night in Soho, the latest Edgar Wright flick, which I was most excited for going into the festival, and it mostly held up. I think this is a movie that does best if you don't know anything about it going in. Maybe just watch a little bit of the teaser, but if you're remotely interested in it, I would just go in and watch it. Don't read the premise. I didn't read the premise. Just went in based on Edgar Wright alone. And so much of it really works. It starts dazzlingly. It's so different from Edgar Wright's other movies like Scott Pilgrim or Baby Driver. together. But the choreography between Thomas and Mackenzie and Anya Taylor-Joy is stunning and definitely tracks with Wright's style, and I love the foundation that was built there. But this is essentially his first foray into a general horror thriller. Like, obviously he's done horror comedy with Shaun of the Dead, but this was definitely being played more serious to mixed results. Because some of it really works. I absolutely love the concept that they were bringing to the movie, the ideas he was looking to explore with co-writer Krysty Wilson-Cairns, but I do think it falters a bit as it moves into the execution of its conclusion. I like what happens. I think they just could have expressed it on screen differently. Still definitely recommend it if you're interested. Great performances, music, and vibes. I'll absolutely be catching it again, and I'm super excited to talk about it and like one specific concept that it explores and in detail more once it's available for all of you guys to see too. But those were these standouts for me, either because they were the ones that people seem most hyped about, or they're the ones that like I just enjoyed the most. So if there's something you feel is missing here, you can feel free to ask down below. If I catch the comment, I'll give you my thoughts. But if I didn't mention it in this video, it probably I either didn't catch it or it didn't have enough of an impact for me to mention it one way or the other. But thank you all so much for watching. Thanks as always to my Patreon supporters. Subscribe to the channel if you're new, leave a like on the video if you're into that kind of thing. Feel free to follow my other social medias that I'll have linked down below. Hope you're all having a fantastic day. I'm mostly okay, and we'll catch you all later.